The eastern shore of Virginia boasts nearly 900,000 acres of land, much of which is unique natural habitat. According to the Virginia Department of Conservation and Recreation, approximately 15% of the shoreline is protected by conservation efforts. Half of this percentage is protected by conservation easements, which are voluntary, legally binding agreements that limit potentially harmful use of the land, including possible development. In addition to avoiding the dangers of overdevelopment, the natural ecosystem performs the essential functions of helping to prevent flooding while sustaining wildlife, marine life, and migratory routes. A conservation easement is a voluntary deeded agreement between a landowner and a qualified conservation organization. Qualified conservation organizations on the Eastern Shore of Virginia include the Virginia Eastern Shore Land Trust and the Nature Conservancy, both of which operate as non-profit, tax-exempt, charitable organizations. The IRS also monitors the land, providing tax breaks for those who properly adhere to easement requirements. While the promise of perpetuity may appear to be safeguarded, there are termination procedures for conservation easements. In Massachusetts, for instance, Amendment 97 of the Massachusetts Constitution both lays out the value of conservation easements and provides an exit. In its final line, the amendment states, "Lands and easements taken or acquired for such natural resource purposes shall not be used for other purposes or otherwise disposed of except by laws enacted by a two-thirds vote, taken by yeas and nays of each branch of the state legislature." Nevertheless, a compilation of Article 97 land transfers showed that at least 60 such conversions were authorized by the 2005 through 2006 legislature, and at least 83 by the 2007 through 2008 legislature. About half the parcels were owned by cities or towns, and half by the state. The most frequent actions were release or abandonment of a conservation easement and transfer of title. Some conversions have involved lands without conservation restrictions or other formal designation, though they may have been intended as or historically considered conservation land. Most of the transfers did not include a requirement for replacement land. Additionally, there are three specific risks to maintaining perpetuity: real estate development, new owners, and term easements. On the eastern shore of Virginia, the overdevelopment of land is not as much of a threat as it was during the real estate boom from 1999 to 2007. Without the perpetuity of these conservation easements, though, development would almost certainly occur and turn this open land into another crowded resort for tourists. While having recreational areas for the public is meaningful, sustaining open spaces, natural lands, and habitats must also be respected. Encroaching development puts the natural habitat at risk. Conservation easements also face the threat of new owners who are not developers. If they do not agree with the principles of conservation, or they wish to use the land in a way that the easement prohibits, a loosely held promise of perpetuity could spell disaster. All conservation easements on the eastern shore are currently held in perpetuity unless they are term easements. A term easement lasts for only a 20 to 30-year period of time. The availability of term easements overlooks the true purpose of conservation: longevity. They take advantage of the tax benefits and remove conservation from the equation, thus threatening perpetuity and everything that a conservation easement is meant to protect. To understand the true dangers of overturning perpetuity, we must consider the immediate and long-term benefits these easements produce. Conservation easements not only provide the appeal of having wide open space, the natural ecosystems also provide protection against flooding. The flooding of any area not only disrupts the ecosystems in place, but it destroys homes, businesses, wildlife, and human life. A recent example illustrates this. Hurricane Sandy was the deadliest and most destructive hurricane of the 2012 Atlantic hurricane season, as well as the second costliest hurricane in United States history. The conservation easements that are in place on the eastern shore protected this land from complete destruction during Hurricane Sandy. The undisturbed environment that is naturally in place allowed the marshlands to keep down the storm surge, and the land remained unharmed. The areas located north that were developed without considering the environment were all basically destroyed. Protected natural marshlands and wetlands can provide a natural reservoir for rainwater and storm surge. On the eastern shore of Virginia, the water was naturally displaced as it fell over several days, and the undeveloped areas were not plagued with flooding. It is important for humans to realize their responsibility to protect restrictions, such as conservation easements, as a measure to defend human life and wildlife from natural disasters. If the eastern shore hadn't been under the protection of perpetuity, there may not have been the scientific evidence necessary to prove why its ecosystems are now worth protecting, and how, as humans, we can learn from them. Conservation easements should also be protected to defend the agricultural industry, which supports the local economy of Eastern Virginia. If the land is compromised or developed, the agricultural industry is at risk, and so is the economy. The agricultural industry in Eastern Virginia is a large part of Virginia's overall economy, accounting for 8.1% of all of the agriculture in the state. The continuation and consistency of natural farmlands and open space are crucial so the agricultural industry can exist. But the management of the natural habitat and how it impacts the environment is also critical. If the industry is left unchecked, it may produce unknown adverse effects on the environment. These negative externalities can also negatively affect other industries that rely on unpolluted waters to preserve the natural habitat for humans and wildlife alike. As humans, it is our challenge and responsibility to protect wild animals, including those that are endangered, along with their natural habitat. The eastern shore of Virginia is a critical stopping point for the migratory routes and habitats for several bird and butterfly species. These include songbirds, raptors, and monarchs. This area is the largest place in America for birds migrating south and one of the most important migratory stopping points in the world. The Barrier Islands, as one example, provide shelter for more than 250 species of birds. Indeed, a multitude of creatures call the eastern shore home, including the endangered Delmarva fox squirrel, the northern beach tiger beetle, the native oyster, whimbrels, and the American black duck. Furthermore, there is the necessity of promoting biodiversity. Defending the perpetuity of conservation easements ensures the preservation of wildlife, biodiversity, and habitat, all of which our species also needs. Biodiversity, which is the variety of plants and animal species living in a shared environment, is more important to mankind than it may first seem. The eastern shore is a tropical or humid environment rich with biodiversity. The conservation easements on the eastern shore of Virginia should be held in perpetuity, without exception, to provide this unique region with lasting protection. Conservation easements safeguard against a great many threats that can put the land, habitat, and inhabitants, including us, at risk. With such high stakes, anything short of perpetuity is a gamble.